What is popping, my bad witches and AGA thoughts? It is me, MT, and welcome back to the Heavy Spoiler Show, y'all. This is about to be a breakdown for episode 7 of AGATHA All Along. I can't wait to dive into this, so let's just not wait and just do it. Death's Hand in Mine is the title of the 7th episode of AGATHA All Along. And once again, this show is doing a great job with these incredibly fitting titles because death itself is a huge theme in this episode, as this yellow area of the Witch's Road is centered around the wispy and or kooky Lilia Calderu and her own relationship with dying, while also revealing Rio Vidal's true identity as the cosmic entity Death in the MCU. And the episode starts in the way that it would unfortunately end, with Lilia Calderu falling to her death. But unlike the way it plays out towards the end of the episode, we see Lilia falling in a sea of darkness within the coldness of the void. Strong symbolic foreshadowing towards the dark, cold embrace soon about to take her. Death in the MCU is tightly associated with concepts of darkness after all, and when the cosmic entity Death was first made canonical in the MCU in 2014's Guardians of the Galaxy, we see her carved on the walls of the Power Stone Temple Room on the planet Morag alongside her other fellow cosmic entities, Entropy, Infinity, and Eternity. And in this carving, each one of these cosmic entities is pointing towards a particular Infinity Stone color housed at the center, with Death herself fittingly choosing to have her hand hover over the red Reality Stone, the very stone that was forged out of the darkness of the primordial void by Malekith himself. This is also why I believe Odin decided to cast Hela, the goddess of death, into the colorless shadow realm after her obsession with death became too much for him. Darkness and death go hand in hand in the MCU. But anyways, after we see Lilia take a tumble in the abyss, we catch up with Billy and Agatha making their way down this new yellow part of the Witch's Road. And like I brought up before towards the end of my last Agatha All Along breakdown, the color of each area of the Witch's Road appears to be strongly tied to the Infinity Stones of the MCU, specifically the order the Infinity Stones appeared during the Infinity Saga. Tesseract Blue, then Ether Red, then Power Stone Purple, then Mind Stone Yellow, followed by Time Stone Green, and likely Soul Stone Orange at the very end. And while this may simply look like a fun nod to the MCU's past, if you know how the Infinity Stone energies themselves relate to science, then I believe you'll be able to see how each color of the road was meant to challenge each one of these witches. For example, the first part of the Witch's Road was themed blue, and during that trial, Jennifer Kale was forced to expand her potential as a witch even without access to her powers. Much like how blue energy in the MCU is tied to the expansion of the universe. Like Nick Fury and all the homies at S.H.I.E.L.D. were extremely familiar with this expansion concept when they were studying the Tesseract at the Dark Energy Mission Facility right before Loki decided to pop in and wreck all their shit. In astronomy, dark energy is thought to be responsible for the continued expansion of our universe every second. Like, our universe is literally getting bigger and bigger every single second because of this invisible dark energy shit. But in the MCU, Kevin Feige has purposely colored this invisible dark energy shit blue. Ego the Living Planet from Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 was a living dark energy brain, and because of this, his entire life's mission was his expansion, because that's what dark energy was always meant to do in the cosmos. And we also see this expressed in characters like Carol Danvers and Tony Stark when they had their potential expanded through Tesseract dark energy as well. So like I said before, this blue area expanded Jennifer Kale's overall witch abilities. Then the red area of the Witch's Road is themed after the Ether, the dark weapon of dark unseen forces like the Dark Elves, who not even Heimdall could see with his all-seeing eyeballs. The red-haired Alice Wu Gulliver had to confront her own invisible darkness, just like Thor had to fight Malekith and the Ether. And the purple area of the road was all about the purple Agatha's power-hungry nature, and how she cannot help her obsession with absorbing energy into herself to increase her own cosmic power, which is reflective of the absorptive and destructive nature of the Power Stone itself. And that is of course followed by this newest yellow area of the road, which is centered around the scattered mind of Lilia Calderu, who is challenged by the Witch's Road to conquer the mystery of her random quantum leaps through time in order for her sisters and nephew in the craft to continue on the road without her. And just like I theorized last week, we see towards the end of this episode that the next area of the road will actually be themed green, as the Time Stone of course made its debut in the MCU in Doctor Strange 1 not long after the Yellow Mind Stone was exposed by Ultron in Age of Ultron. Like, Kevin Feige truly went out of his way to make sure his entire universe is color-coded to thematic and scientific perfection, and it is truly a marvel to get to see this unfold in real time, man. But anyways, the colors of the Witch's Road aside, as the two make their way down the road in awkward silence, after all of the tension that last trial brought, Agatha attempts to get Billy to talk to her again by encouraging him to ask her the questions that are undoubtedly on his mind. Billy's first question is fittingly about Rio's whereabouts, something that Agatha is unwilling to answer, likely because she knows that Rio Death is Delicious Vidal is probably attending to the recently deceased corpse of one Alice Wu Gulliver, courtesy of our favorite hungry hypocrite. Attempting to quickly change the subject, Agatha then asks Billy if he has any questions for his mom's ex-best friend and favorite babysitter, referencing her time with young Billy Maximoff and his brother Tommy during their shared time in Wanda's Westview prison. And at the mention of Wanda Maximoff, Billy immediately rejects the idea of Wanda as his actual mother, seeming to prefer Rebecca Kaplan as his actual mother, which is actually quite interesting. But then again, Billy did spend most of his life as a living physical person as Rebecca Kaplan's son, so I kinda don't blame him. Then Billy asks the question that we, the audience, have been wondering since the events of Multiverse of Madness. Is Wanda Maximoff dead? To which Agatha jokingly answers yes, just to see Billy's reaction before quickly saying no, then maybe, to more accurately reflect her true uncertainty on the matter. But she does tell Billy about how she did see Wanda's body, which is technically true, if seeing Wanda's body while Agatha was trapped in her crime fantasy illusion actually counts, which it kind of doesn't. With Agatha only being a source of vague-ass answers, Billy tells her that he severely doubts her life's experiences and if she's even been on the road at all before, which is honestly very likely the case because I feel like Agatha is straight up lying, as Agatha hasn't really shown deep familiarity with the Witch's Road at all during the course of this entire journey. Then the two walk up the road towards a castle seen in the distance, with the drawbridge of that castle holding a similar moon design that has been found at the start of all of their challenges. And while Billy doesn't actually tell us what this waning crescent symbol here is supposed to represent, the Behind the Ballad trailer for Agatha All Along seems to indicate that this is the air phase. Upon entering the next trial, the outfits of the Coven change yet again, with this new transformation being the most drastic so far, as each of these witches have been given a costume depicting a famous witch from popular media. Lilia is dressed as Glinda the Good Witch from The Wizard of Oz, while Agatha is fittingly the Wicked Witch of the West from the same film. Billy and Jennifer, on the other hand, have been given the costumes of famous Disney witches, with Billy being dressed up as Maleficent from 1959's Sleeping Beauty, while Jennifer is dressed like the evil queen's old hag disguise from 1937's Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. These outfits are not random, but are supposed to be indicative of a core part of each witch's character or background. Lilia was likely given the costume of Glinda the Good Witch because of an important aspect of the character of Glinda from Lyman Frank Baum's original The Wonderful Wizard of Oz book that was released in the year 1900. In this book, we learn that Glinda, despite looking young, was actually an incredibly old witch who knew, quote, how to keep young in spite of the many years she had lived, end quote. This is exactly like Lilia, who has used her witch powers to prolong her lifespan for a crazy long amount of time. But Lilia is also, of course, given this Glinda costume because she is also the most pure-hearted and wise out of all of the witches in the Coven. Her telling all the witches that she loved them was probably one of my favorite moments of her character. And like I said before, Agatha being the Wicked Witch of the West is extremely fitting, considering that she spent most of her life being wicked herself. Not only this though, in The Wizard of Oz, the Wicked Witch of the West also had her eyes set on killing Dorothy and her dog Toto, and even says, "I'll get you, my pretty, and your little dog too." Agatha tapped into that very same energy while she was hunting Wanda in WandaVision, even saying the words, "and I killed Sparky too," after she kills Wanda's dog. A slight nod to this Wicked Witch of the West. But moving on, Jennifer Kale being modeled after the evil queen from Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs is absolutely perfect for a number of reasons. Firstly, because Jennifer, much like the evil queen, is always concerned with being the most beautiful looking of all, as evidenced by her Kale Care line of beauty products. However, also like the evil queen when she's in her old hag form, Jennifer is also into selling people goods that don't work as advertised. like how the old hag would trick Snow White into eating a Bill Cosby apple. And we also can't forget that the evil queen is also a proficient potion mixer, much like Jennifer is. So Jennifer's costume is pretty on point in my opinion. And finally, I believe Billy Maximoff as Maleficent points to how both those characters are considered to be the most powerful witches in their respective universes, as both Billy and Maleficent both have the powers to hypnotize, shoot blasts of energy, and tap into cosmic knowledge. Not only this, but they both have a far more powerful second form hiding within them, ready to come out when they both need it most. Maleficent's second form is, of course, her powerful fire-breathing dragon form that she whips out as a last resort to attempt to cook all of her enemies. And while Billy himself does not have a dragon form within him per se, in the comics, Billy ends up being revealed to have the powers of a cosmic being known as the Demiurge hidden inside of him, with the Demiurge being this all-powerful being that is destined to rewrite the laws of magic and reality itself in the future. And Billy has tapped into this power in the past to go toe-to-toe with some of the most powerful cosmic entities out there. But anyways, when Agatha and Billy first arrive to this challenge, they notice that the tarot table at the center of the room has the words, "Your path winds out of time," written on the sides. The first and biggest clue that this trial was purposely designed for Lilia Calderu, the witch unwound from time. Attempting to do a tarot himself, Billy draws the horse-drawn chariot card, which immediately causes one of the OSHA non-compliant swords on the ceiling to fall towards the ground. And the Seven of Swords does not seem to do them any favors either, which then prompts an impatient Agatha to randomly throw a bunch of cards down on the table to prove that tarot is just one big old farce. And as she does this, she laughs maniacally like a proper Wicked Witch of the West before forcing our Maleficent out of his chair to dodge a sword from impaling him. Something that the original Maleficent from Sleeping Beauty did not do before her demise in the 1959 classic. And if matters could not get any worse for the two, the ceiling then starts to descend, making Billy verbally wish that Lilia was there to handle this terrible tarot trial. Then the scene switches to Lilia Calderu herself, who we see has survived Billy's attempt to get her and Jennifer swallowed up by the Witch's Road. And after returning from the moment right before her death, Lilia is shocked to learn from Jennifer that Teen is indeed the son of the Scarlet Witch, and even more surprised to learn that she was the one who told Jennifer that in the first place. Jennifer then tells Lilia that she's been acting wispy and kooky, but before Lilia replies back, her ass is sent back in time to episode 4, finally explaining why she randomly asks Alice if she's wispy or kooky earlier on in the season, and why Lilia was trying to tell Alice to don't do something. But apparently, the reason why Lilia was not able to finish her sentence with Alice in episode 4 is because she actually ended up finishing it with Agatha in episode 3 when she says, "Try to save Agatha," with her intention obviously being to keep Alice from trying to save Agatha in episode 5. The very mistake that got Alice's ass turned into a prune. But speaking of episode 3, remember how Lilia followed that young woman in the yellow dress into a room with a dead older woman in a red dress? Apparently those were the past versions of both herself and her mother, back when they were practicing magic centuries in the past in the beautiful Italian region of Sicily. And judging by what we learn later on in this episode, it seems like my past assumption about this robed skeleton that appears behind this woman being the cosmic entity Death was correct, which is super cool. But anyways, Lilia's teacher then immediately notices that young Lilia's mind has been possessed by her future self, prompting her to stop speaking in her native Sicilian tongue to a language that an older Lilia is more familiar with, English. And noticing that she's at her first ever tea leaf reading lesson, Lilia makes the self-defeating claim that she's always been bad at tea leaves and always will be, only for her teacher to chastise her for that self-fulfilling prophecy before encouraging her to look at what she actually sees before her. Lilia is then transported back to the present moment as both her and Jennifer are traveling in the tunnels of the Witch's Road. And when Jennifer asks Lilia to explain what her gaps in memory are like, Lilia opens up to Jennifer about how she's always experienced her life out of order ever since she was a child. And while she did try to ignore it for a while, this weird phenomena has appeared to return in her life with a vengeance, with Lilia assuming that this could be happening because she is close to the end of her life. But then Lilia Lilia's time-traveling mind makes another quantum leap into the near future, right after Agatha saves Lilia from getting impaled by a sword before her time, because we all know that comes after. When Lilia gets up, she immediately attacks Billy for what he did to her, before quickly realizing that Billy can read her thoughts clearly, including her rage at Billy for not using his fancy-schmancy new powers to save Alice. Lilia then remembers that she had indeed met William Kaplan before during his bar mitzvah, before Jennifer pulls her away and assures her that both her and Billy are cool now. And because Agatha is Agatha, she cannot help but call the forgetful Lilia Dory, a reference to the blue tang fish with amnesia from 2003's Finding Nemo. Lilia soon reveals that she was the one who placed the sigil on Billy 3 years ago because she saw the accident to come, as well as Billy's split future. But as soon as she reveals this, Lilia is then briefly sent back to episode 5, to the moment right after the Ouija board channeled death. And this is right before Lilia is then brought right back to her tea leaves lesson. But during this particular trip back to her teacher, I noticed that the table that they're sitting on is shaped like a hexagon, evoking the hexagon theme that seemed to dominate WandaVision. Lilia then asks her teacher how to control what's happening to her, but she's told that her role is not to control, but to actually let go and to see what's being shown to her. Lilia is then immediately sent back to the tunnels, where she finds Billy's spellbook that he lost earlier in the season. And thanks to the sounds of Agatha and Billy bickering, Jen and Lilia make their way to the castle tower right when Billy wishes Lilia was there. Then Lilia takes over as the tarot reader and starts reading Billy, first pulling out the Magician, pointing to Billy's enormous potential as a wizard, as well as his ability to turn all of his goals into a reality. Strong foreshadowing to Billy Maximoff's future as the all-powerful cosmic demiurge. This is then followed by the Sun card when they go to see what's missing in Billy's life. And since the Sun represents reunion, this card is meant to point to Billy's desire to be reunited with his Hex family, especially his brother Tommy. But right after this, the sword that Agatha saved her from in the future comes falling down right before Lilia is sent back to the tea leaves lesson once again. Her maestra then pushes Lilia to remember that death comes for us all, and that no matter how proficient she may be at seeing the future, nothing will be able to change what is set in stone. So instead of fearing her future falling, Lilia realizes she needs to focus on what's in front of her to do what she can to save her coven. Lilia is then brought back to the moment when both she and Jennifer were first brought to these subterranean tunnels, where Lilia tells Jennifer everything that she's learned as her mind has begun to fill in all the gaps. And when they get up to see their surroundings, Jennifer notices an abandoned Westview Metro subway car and wonders if that path could actually lead them out of the Witch's Road. And honestly, taking that path might have actually done that, because the inclusion of a subway randomly underneath the Witch's Road seems to point to something that Westview Historical Society member Sharon Davis pointed out towards the very beginning of episode 3.
I am a member of the Westview Historical Society. All I would have expected to see down here were remnants of our failed public transit system.
Then, after the two hide from the sudden appearance of the Salem 7 looking for Agatha, Lilia begs Jennifer to come with her to save Billy and Agatha because she now sees the value of being in a coven, even going so far to call Jennifer her sister in the craft. Lilia then accepting her coven wholeheartedly seems to unlock Lilia's ability to jump through her own timeline at will, much like how Loki eventually learned that the secret to time slipping was actually focusing on the souls of those he cared about the most. It's not about where, when, or why, it's about who. And it seems like Lilia is using the people that she cares about the most to help her travel through her own life in a similar way. Lilia then realizes that she is indeed the Queen of Cups, an intuitive woman whose inner mind is to be trusted. She then whips out the Three of Pentacles when she goes to find out what she's been missing, with that card representing the coven that she's finally grown to accept. She then picks up the Knight of Wands when looking at the path behind, with that card of course representing the fallen Alice Wu Gulliver, whose body was unfortunately left behind. And Alice being the Knight of Wands is fitting, considering that she's supposed to be the protection witch as well as a cop. The High Priestess card is then pulled as the path ahead, with that card apparently being representative of Jennifer Kale, and how she has immense spiritual power, but is unable or unwilling to use that power. likely pointing to how Jennifer Kale's magic block might be one that she's placed on herself without knowing. And when tarot reading the obstacles, she picks up the Three of Swords, which is what Lilia said towards the end of episode 4 as Billy almost died from his puncture wound. And for the windfall, she selects the Tower reversed, just like she saw when she first met Billy Kaplan at the bar mitzvah. And of course, for the final destination card, she pulls Death. Right as she's brought back to the moment, Lilia and Jen's bodies land underground. Lilia comes to first, of course, and sees Rio approaching her with a knife in one hand and some vines in the other, much like the Death Tarot card, confirming that Rio is indeed MCU Death, like I theorized in my earlier videos. One of the most important cosmic beings in all of Marvel, and most famously known for being the woman that fueled all of the cruelty and death brought upon by Thanos the Mad Titan in the comic books. But obviously, not all of you watching are big old comic book nerds like me, so don't worry, I got you. Here's the down low on death. As you could probably guess, death is the physical embodiment of the concept of death itself. And though death oftentimes appears in the form of a woman in the comic books, death really has no gender, and merely appears as any physical form that suits whoever is viewing them, whether that be male, female, human, or alien. As long as Death gets their job done, her outward appearance doesn't really matter. But since Marvel primarily has humanoid beings in the forefront of their narratives, Death usually takes the form of a humanoid woman, or the skeleton of one anyway. Death was of course born with the Big Bang of the 616 universe, along with all the other major cosmic entities that govern other core aspects of existence, like Infinity, the personification of the expanding spatial aspect of the 616 universe, and Eternity, the very personification of everything and everyone in the 616 universe. And while death is tightly associated with the concept of oblivion, death is merely oblivion's cosmic successor, due to the fact that before the Big Bang itself, the universe was just pure nothingness, with no one but the cosmic entity Oblivion ruling all of that nothingness. When Death was born with the Big Bang, Death became the only favored sister of Oblivion, as Death was also just as much of a hater of life as Oblivion was. And because Eternity and his sister Infinity were personifications of life and light, Death became their enemy as their natural opposite. And together, Eternity, Infinity, and Death all sort of maintain the natural balance of the universe. Not too much light and life, and yet not too much darkness and death. And it's because of this that Death would regard themselves as Eternity's dark twin, the other half of the coin of existence meant to keep life from overpopulating the universe. And because death is such an important aspect of existence, Death is virtually unable to be killed, which is a pretty sweet perk. Now, if you have ever read the 2013 comic Thanos Rising that detailed the very origins of Thanos himself, you already know that Death first came across Thanos when Thanos was just a small purple boy living on Saturn's moon of Titan with a bunch of other Eternals who migrated to Titan from Earth a long time ago. Thanos was literally just chilling on Titan, trying to be accepted by the other genetically perfect Eternals all around him, when Death decided to turn into a humanoid-looking female Eternal and began to warp his mind into loving death and killing things. Like young Thanos straight up used to be as queasy about death as everybody else, until this stupid bitch decided to fill his mind with the idea that murder is totally cool and the best way to become a scientist of life, just like Thanos' father Alars was. However, when Death noticed that a young Thanos was trying his best to reject such dark thoughts, she would convince Thanos to lead his core friend group, which included his childhood crush at the time, into a cave that she knew would collapse, leading to the deaths of all of his eternal friends, with the very flesh of those friends being eaten by a bunch of green-tailed lizards. Now filled with anger at the lizards who killed his friends, Death would then convince Thanos to go back to the cave and annihilate the entire nest of green-tailed lizards there. Thanos' very first steps into a life of killing. Death and Thanos would then grow up together over the years, with Death pretending to be one of Thanos' eternal friends and encouraging him to graduate from killing small things like cave lizards and cave apes to killing and dissecting actual Eternals, all the while convincing himself that all of this death was in the good name of science as part of an effort for Thanos to understand why he was born with his particular genetic deformity. However, Thanos would later realize that Death convinced him to actually love the act of killing itself, which would then lead Thanos to cutting open his own mother, killing her. However, despite this, Thanos would still try to swear off killing for a period of time, leaving his homeworld to spend a couple of years banging a bunch of alien chicks and fathering a bunch of purple-ass kids. However, when he returned home to Titan, Death was there waiting for him and instantly convinced him that she was the only person he needed. So Thanos decided to hunt down all of his baby mamas and babies and sacrifice them in the name of Death, before expanding his thirst for genocide to as many planets as he could find throughout the cosmos, all to get Death's attention and love. Not long after this, Death would reveal her true self to Thanos as a cosmic entity, telling him that she would only reciprocate his love once he's annihilated all life in the universe, leading Thanos to completely decimate his homeworld of Titan, also he could get a singular kiss from Death like the genetically deformed simp that he is. So Death is pretty much directly responsible for Thanos' crazy-ass deadly mentality, and would become more and more pleased with him the more he spread death around the cosmos. However, Thanos is not the only person Death had eyes for in the past, as Thanos would find some pretty steep competition for Death's affections after Death would run into the undying Merc with the Mouth, Deadpool, as detailed in the pages of 1998's Deadpool Death Annual comic. While Wade Wilson was being tortured by Francis in Weapon X as part of their mission to create super soldiers, Death visited Wade and started to fall in love with him when she realized that Wade could see her when she was supposed to be invisible to living beings, with Thanos being the only person that has been able to see her before. However, because of Wade's horrible situation of being tortured day after day by Francis and the gang, Wade actually wanted Death herself, whereas Thanos merely wanted Death so that he could experience Death's love, due to Thanos craving love ever since he was a child. So, because of this, Death appeared to be way less resistant to Deadpool's flirtations than she was with Thanos' advances. Thanos would of course see how much Death and Deadpool loved each other and get extremely pissed at their connection, leading Thanos to verbally curse Deadpool to never die, just so Wade never got to be with Death in the end. This all being said, if Death is flirting with you in the Marvel Universe, it probably means you have a massive potential for providing her with a bunch of dead bodies to aid in her overall desire to wipe out all life in the cosmos. Which is, of course, why MCU Death fell in love with Agatha Harkness while she was slurping all the life out of countless witches with the Darkhold. And I know what some of you might be thinking. Yeah, Death might be super important to the overall health of the Marvel cosmos, but surely there must be some way to kill Death, no? Well, technically, yes, there is, but that feat isn't normally possible for any being that falls below Death on the cosmic hierarchy ladder. The only entity with the ability to eradicate Death at will is the Living Tribunal. Specifically, one of the aspects of the Living Tribunal that calls themselves Death of Death, who made their first appearance relatively recently in 2019's Valkyrie Jane Foster number 6 and 7. Death of Death's main job as a tangential but connected entity to the Living Tribunal is to judge whether the death of a particular universe in the multiverse should live or die, especially if that universe's death isn't correctly doing her job. However, there was one time a group of alternate universe Avengers managed to kill Death by using a dark magic technique called necropsy, which the Avengers of the Cancerverse used to eliminate one of Death's chosen avatars, which, by comic book logic, also eliminated the death of that universe as well, turning that entire universe into a universe called the Cancerverse, where basically nothing could ever die. Not sure how all that works, but apparently that's a thing that was established in 2010's The Thanos Imperative number 3. But in regards to Death in the MCU, she has technically been MCU canon ever since 2014's Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1, when a carving of her, alongside the other cosmic entities Eternity, Infinity, and Entropy, can be seen all over the walls of the Power Stone Shrine on Morak, a shrine that I actually dissect in detail in my breakdown of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1 that you guys can check out here. Another carving of Death would of course be seen in statue form at the Gates of Eternity in 2022's Thor Love and Thunder. And as soon as everyone learns that Rio is Death, here come the Salem 7 to fuck shit up. Lilia then orders everyone to enter the Iron Maiden in order to head to the next part of the trial. And since the Iron Maiden was famously a method of torture in the past, this exit is very much like the stove exit from episode 3 that all the witches were reluctant to use to leave the first trial. And while saying goodbye to her coven, she tells Agatha to hit the deck as soon as she calls her a coward, likely referring to Rio and the fight that both Agatha and Rio engage in during the mid-season trailer. Then, after she gives Billy his spellbook back, she tells Jennifer that she has truly loved being a witch before shutting the doors to sacrifice herself by reversing the tower and killing all the members of the Salem 7. Then the episode ends with the bittersweet implication that Lilia did one last time shift right before her death, to the very beginning of her tea leaf lessons, just to squeeze in a little bit more time with her old master before she departed to the next life. The credits then roll to the 1973 hit Time in a Bottle by Jim Croce, the second time we've heard this song in a Marvel production after it was featured in the Quicksilver speedster scene in X-Men Days of Future Past. But yeah, that is it for this episode 7 breakdown of Agatha All Along. What do you guys think of this series? And what do you guys think is going to happen in these last 2 episodes? Let us know in the comment section down below. You guys can follow me at Mastertainment on Twitter, Threads, Instagram, YouTube, wherever I am on the internet. But most importantly, follow Heavy Spoilers by hitting the subscribe button and hitting that notification bell to get notifications for every time we upload a video. But like always, I love you guys for taking the time to watch this video. You guys are amazing, and I'll catch you guys later. Bye.